Hey everyone, it's Brett Hornby here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. As you saw in my legend intro, it's time for another run for another road to the Grey Cup, as it's now November. As sadly, my Calgary Stampeders will not be a part of on the road to the 111th Grey Cup that will be in Vancouver, but I'm going to still do my playoff previews of the 5 games from the East and West semifinals, East and West final, including the preview of the 111th Grey Cup. So for this first video, we'll be taking a look at previewing the East semifinal that will happen on Saturday, November the 2nd, as I've done in previous years. But before I break it down, to see if you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fans journey, just make sure you hit like and subscribe. I have other social media links down in the description below. So let's bring my notes and let's get going for the East semifinal. As I'm trying to do a little differently, as I make a more custom thumbnail and see if I can streamline it a little more this year. But the East semifinal preview will have the Toronto Argonauts. They will be hosting the Ottawa RedBlacks. As mentioned, it'll be on Saturday, November the 2nd for 2024. This is the 2024 CFL Playoffs, and this will be at BMO Field in Toronto, Ontario. And it'll be a 1 p.m. Mountain kickoff. It's Mountain time for me, or 3 p.m. Eastern. So how did we get here? Shall we say is, well, the Toronto Argonauts are hosting this game because they finished second in the East Division. They had a 10-8 record. Ottawa RedBlacks, they finished third in the East Division of the Canadian Football League. They had a 9-8-1 record. So both Ottawa and Toronto make the playoffs, and the winner of this game will be taking on the Montreal Alouettes in Montreal next Saturday at Percival Molson Stadium in the East Final. And whoever wins that will be going to Vancouver for the Grey Cup. So if we break down the records even more, the Toronto Argonauts, being that they're at home, they were actually pretty good at home this year, as they were 7-2 at home, but they were 3-5 versus the East Division. But Montreal was the most dominant team. What was a big part of that? Well, the Ottawa RedBlacks, they actually played very well at home, but they were only 2-7 on the road. But just like the Toronto Argonauts, the Ottawa RedBlacks were also 3-5 against the East Division. As I mentioned, the winner plays the Montreal Alouettes in Montreal for the East Final. So now if you look at the season series, as these two teams did play each other twice in the regular season, and ultimately it was split, and shouldn't be a surprise given the home and road records. It was the home team that won each game. The first time that these two teams met was week 14 of the CFL regular season on Saturday, September the 7th. This game was in Ottawa, and the Ottawa RedBlacks won that game 41-27. And then the second game happened the second last week of the regular season. This game actually had on the line on who was going to host this game. On Saturday, October the 19th, it was the Toronto Argonauts. They won this game 38-31. Toronto dominated for much of the game, but Ottawa actually made it close in the fourth quarter with a couple of onside kicks. So ultimately, you could say it was a split. The home team won both games. Now, if you look at the playoff history, usually I like to look back at the last 3 times that these two teams met. You could say, on one hand, this is the first time these two teams played each other, because the Ottawa RedBlacks came back in the Canadian Football League in 2014. We had the Renegades from 2002 to 2006, but that Ottawa team did not make the playoffs. And then you had the Ottawa Rough Riders 2 words, where Saskatchewan Roughriders is 1 word. Follow along. They were around for over 120 years and folded in 1996. But I'm going to include all Ottawa football history. So this is a rare matchup because this is the first time Toronto and Ottawa are playing each other in the playoffs since 1990. Because last time Toronto and Ottawa played in 1990, it was the 1990 East semifinal, as the Toronto Argonauts won that game and they hosted the Ottawa Rough Riders as they won 34-25. And then before that, you'll have to go back to 1982, my birth year, the 1982 East final. It was the Toronto Argonauts won that one, and they were the home team 44-7. The winner of that obviously went on to go take on the Edmonton Eskimos and got steamrolled in their 5th straight championship. But in the 1997 East semifinal, actually the Ottawa Rough Riders, when they were the home team, they actually won against the Toronto Argonauts 21-16, and the Ottawa Rough Riders were the defending Grey Cup champions that year. So you could say it's a rare matchup for a Battle of Ontario. So now when it comes to who's got the edge, I'm going to give my personal feelings and look at the CFL.ca website. So on the offensive side of the ball, I'm going to say the Toronto Argonauts, they will have the edge when it comes to the running game and the offensive line. Because Kadeen Carey is the running back for the Toronto Argonauts, and their offensive line, anchored by Allen, should give the edge. However, the Ottawa RedBlacks, they are with Drew Brown at quarterback. First-year starter, had a lot of experience with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. He has the ability to put up big numbers, and they also got Hardy, one of the leading receivers in the Canadian Football League. So when it comes to the run game and the offensive line, you could probably say the Toronto Argonauts have the edge. But when it comes to the throwing game, quarterback and receivers, you can give that to the Ottawa RedBlacks. And also Chad Kelly. We'll see how he does. This will be his 2nd playoff game as starter. Let's just say it was a disaster last year in the East final that waded to the big upset by the Montreal Alouettes in their run to the Grey Cup last year. However, if you go on defense, well, the defensive line and the linebackers, the first 2 levels, we can say you can give that edge to the Toronto Argonauts. There are a lot of former Stampeders on the defensive line, including LaShawn Amos, for example. Or the defensive backs. They seem to get stronger with the Ottawa RedBlacks, so that could play a role depending on the run game or the receiving game on defense. So now when it comes to the kicking side of the game, it's really anyone's game at this stage. You got Liram Harlahu for the Toronto Argonauts, and also Lewis Ward for the Ottawa RedBlacks. Actually, throughout the league this year, there wasn't really any kicking issues, so it's pretty much going to be whoever has the game on, but it's a draw. However, the last part of the special teams would give that edge to the Toronto Argonauts. Jerry Grant, he's definitely good at punt returns, and one of the sights I saw on my trip to Toronto when I went to see the Stampeders play on the road was a nice punt return by Jerry Grant. However, it sucks when it comes against your team. So let's just say when you look at who has got the edge, we're going to be anticipating a close one here. I mean, when you look at the season series, it looks still lopsided. So I'm going to say when you just look at the hard stats and numbers, it's going to be anyone's game this stage when it comes to the playoffs. So now I look at this side of the last playoff win for either side. Well, the last time the Toronto Argonauts won a playoff game actually was the back in 2022 when they won the 109th Grey Cup in Regina, when they won against the Toronto Winnipeg Blue Bombers 24-23. So the last playoff win for the Toronto Argonauts was when they were hoisting the Grey Cup in Regina in 2022. Well, the Ottawa RedBlacks, you got to go further back for their last playoff win. This is actually the first time that Toronto or the Ottawa RedBlacks, meant to say, are in the playoffs since 2018. The last playoff win for the Ottawa RedBlacks was the 2018 East Final, where they hosted the Hamilton Tiger-Cats, and they won 46-27. So there's going to be some longer drought going to be end, or maybe a more recent drought trend when it comes to the last playoff win. So now the last part of the video before we get into the weather forecast, because the games are outside, it's November in Canada. Will the weather play a factor? Is this team will win if? My factors on the Toronto Argonauts to win if, I'm going to say, if Kadeem Carey has a big game on the ground. I'm familiar with him being a Calgary Stampeder fan. He either has a big game, or if he gets stopped, he gets stopped. I'm going to say Chad Kelly stays out of trouble. In this case, I'm saying just on the field. He does have a checkered past, and he was suspended for half the season, and he definitely got into trouble with the law before he went to the CFL, but I'm just looking at Chad Kelly. If he looked like the Chad Kelly that is the MOP before the East Final last year, Toronto should win in a landslide. But if he looks like the Chad Kelly that played in the East Final last year, it's going to be a long day for the Toronto Argonauts. Of course, big special teams play. Every football game always seems to be decided by 4 or 5 plays. Well, special teams play big, especially Jeremy Grant, if he gives the Toronto Argonauts favorable field position, or, returns a kickoff or a punt return for a touchdown. Now on the Ottawa side of the ball, if Ottawa will win, I'm going to say Drew Brown. If he is able to put up big numbers, and he had a few games this season that he had over 400 yards passing, but it helps when you have one of the leading receivers and Jake Hardy on your team. So if Drew Brown, if he puts up big numbers, he could be leading Ottawa to the win. I'm going to say if they are able to match the Toronto Argonauts defense, especially in the front 7. I mean, they got Lorenzo Molden, who's a sack master from last year. And then the one weakness of the Ottawa RedBlacks, of the teams that are in the playoffs, is they take a lot of penalties. So if Ottawa can stay disciplined, not take too many penalties that cost the team, they could stay in this one and potentially win this one. You could say pull off a small upset. It won't be a huge upset when you look at the records and how these teams match up. But those are my factors in either team. So the weather forecast is, right now, I check on Environment Canada. I'm actually recording this the day before the game. They're saying it's going to be sunny and 9 degrees in Toronto, and then partly cloudy and a low of 4 degrees. So I understand it was actually a lot warmer in Toronto earlier this week for going into Halloween, but I mean, Southern Ontario is a lot more further south than where I'm here in Calgary. But essentially, if it's going to be sunny, didn't say anything about any wind conditions. Weather won't really play a factor in this one. So now, let's get into the prediction. And I have a different lighting setup this year. I mean, for this one, I use the blue and white because that's the official colors of the East Division. But for my Wiz Smart Bulb, I just program 2 teams. I'm not going to do the scroll wheel thing because the app is a little different now. So I get 2 scenes. So if I think the Toronto Argonauts are going to win this game, I am going to pick this one. See the double blue for the Toronto Argonauts. Or if I think the Ottawa RedBlacks are going to win, I will have this one. And I have the warm white because don't have black for LED bulbs. So, and then if I was going to use my Calgary Stampeders, that'd be a whiter white. So those are the colors I have for this matchup. If I think Toronto's going to win, I use that. I think if Ottawa's going to win, I use that. So let's just go back and forth a few times for your grand scenes. Toronto or Ottawa? Toronto or Ottawa? Well, let's just do this a few more times. What I'm going to settle down on, well, I'm going to settle down with the Ottawa RedBlacks. I think the Ottawa RedBlacks will pull off a small upset. My prediction is I think Ottawa will win this one 31-28. I'll give it about a 55% confidence in this pick. The reason why I think the Ottawa RedBlacks will win this one and advance to take on the Montreal Alouettes next week is I think the fact that Ottawa has not been in the playoffs since 2018. And I think Ottawa, despite the fact that they haven't been as strong on the road, and also the fact that they haven't been in the playoffs since 2018, I think there's a little less pressure on the Ottawa RedBlacks compared to the Toronto Argonauts. And then Toronto still struggles at drawing fans. I'm going to predict that a lot of fans from Ottawa are going to make the trip for this game. But I think it's obviously a close one. I'd put a 3-point difference. But it'd just be too obvious just to always pick the favorite, the home team. Because there were some big upsets last year in the CFL Playoffs. So I think the Ottawa RedBlacks will advance to take on the Montreal Alouettes in East Final. But that's just my opinion. Who do you think is going to win the East semifinal? Toronto or Ottawa? The lights say my pick. But in a separate video, I am also going to preview the West semifinal, which will feature the Saskatchewan Roughriders hosting the BC Lions, so you can see that video. So to close out, I'd like to say, if you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fans journey, just make sure you hit like and subscribe. I have my other social links down in the description below. This is game 1 of 5 of my On the Road to the Grey Cup. The 111th Grey Cup that will be handed out in 2024. The road starts in Toronto. It will be going to Montreal for the east side of the bracket. And eventually it will be going to Vancouver. And Vancouver will be hosting the Grey Cup for the first time in 10 years. And unless if I win my own way in, I won't be going this year. It's getting more expensive. But I have budgeted more. Plan to return to Toronto in March to catch the Flames on the road. I'm still a proud Calgary Stampeders fan, even though we're not a part of it. But I'll just say may the best team win the Grey Cup in 2024. The 111th Grey Cup in Vancouver. So that's why thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video, or go see my West semifinal preview, where I'll preview that game. So I'll see you then.